despite the efforts of his friends to save him from his own caustic extremism, has managed in less than 3 years to alienate the Roman clergy to the point that he is compelled to live out the rest of his life in exile in Bethlehem, where Jerome maintains intimate and intense spiritual friendships with wealthy Christian matrons. In fact, for the bulk of his adult life, Jerome would be supported and surrounded by rich Roman women, St. Paula perhaps being the most important lady in his life. Now, Paula, a 30-something widow, devastated by the loss of her husband, decides to consecrate her daughters as sacred virgins for Christ. Jerome would essentially become part of Paula's extended household until his death, a friend and confidant to St. Paula herself, and a paternal figure to her daughter, the young Estusium. Jerome has been deeply influenced by Origen, a 3rd century scholar and theologian, and head of the catechal school in Alexandria, who in turn had been influenced by the 1st century BC religious movement, the Therapeutae, known as the Healers, a community on the edges of civilization south of Alexandria. Judeans who would later on become Gnostic Christians. Celibate men and women who lived together in simplicity and deep religious contemplation. They lived a life set apart from family, home, and comforts, a new type of social existence. The renunciation of the material world and all sexual desire being the most important components, at least to them, in the struggle to know God. The heavy weight of the mortal body and its sexual desires becomes insulting too, and a hindrance to the development of the spirit. This is according to the Therapeutae. Now, when Jerome wrote of his experiences of solitude in the desert, he comes across the horrifying discovery that no matter how much he fasted or deprived himself, he still felt the fires of sexual desire within him. Jerome, like Origen and the Therapeutae, are disgusted by the body and the erotic aspects of it. This attitude towards human sexual desire appears vividly in Jerome's letters to Estusium, letters in which he encourages her to fast and to shun the lushness of her own nubile feminine body. He calls it a hot little body. Jerome also writes that Estusium needs to be secluded from the world and all manner of potential excesses, wine, heavy foods, and stylish clothes. She must prevent the onslaught of desire, writes Jerome, her own desire, or those she comes into contact with. It is a way to generate holiness, writes Jerome, by reducing the number of distractions in this world of flesh and bone. Like the Therapeutae, who prefigured the Christian compounds, households, and monasteries that would come later, male and female renunciates must remain celibate, live side by side, and refer to one another as brother and sister. They believe that the appetites of the flesh are not benign, and celibacy and virginity are the spiritual ornaments of a disciplined, earnest, and successful soul, a sign of moving towards oneness, union with God. Christians must maintain a principled resistance to the temptations of the flesh, writes Jerome, and transform a basic human instinct, sexual desire, by destroying or abolishing the libido itself and creating a new social reality. Jerome and his group of wealthy Roman matrons and their virginal daughters can only achieve this new social reality by leaving Rome, which they consider a city of sin, and seeking a more aesthetic existence in Palestine. Now, joined by the widow Paula and some other ladies who had left Rome, Jerome is given financial help from the ladies and soon builds a monastery for men near the Basilica of the Nativity at Bethlehem, and also builds 3 houses, 3 communities for women. Paula becomes the head of the women's communities, and after her death, She is succeeded by her daughter Eustochium. It was during these years that Jerome translated the Old Testament into Latin, using both Greek and Hebrew texts, working on the project from around 390 to 406 AD. So it took him roughly 15 or 16 years. He would also write numerous commentaries on the lives of the Old Testament prophets, as well as volumes on Palestinian place names and the origins of Hebrew names in the Bible. He would also compose biographies of numerous religious figures, many homilies, and he would keep up massive correspondences with such important figures as St. Augustine. Now, Jerome's combination of scholarly knowledge, biblical scholarship, and aesthetic beliefs would have a vast, far-reaching influence on medieval scholarship. Jerome, during these years of literary activity, lives and works in a large cave near Christ's birthplace, and opens a free school and a hospital for the pilgrims who have taken the hazardous journey to the Holy Land. Palestinian life is fruitful and harmonious, and becomes attractive to various manner of men and women. Men and women who speak different languages. They all speak different dialects, they all speak different languages, but they all share the same religion. You have Gauls, you have Britons, you have Armenians, Persians, Ethiopians, Egyptians, and Indians, who come seeking the Holy Land that they know only from the Scriptures. Life is good and peaceful, as different choirs chant the Psalms in different languages, and the birds sing, and the sun shines. But in the rest of the Christian world, disputes, debates, and violence continues to threaten the future of the Christian faith. Jerome does not exactly remain silent when in Rome. He doesn't remain silent. When he was in Rome during the time of Pope Damasus, he composed a book called The Perpetual Virginity of Mary, a text written to combat the views of Helvidius. Helvidius claimed that Mary had not remained a virgin, but had had other children by Joseph after the birth of Jesus. Similar ideas were now again put forward by Jovinian, an individual who was once a monk but had become a renegade. Paula's son-in-law, Pamasius, you have to excuse me with some of these pronunciations. I'm from Brooklyn, and while my tongue is gifted at the art of pleasure, well, as a linguist, I have much to be desired. So Pamasius, I believe, spends some of these. He sends some of these heretical writings to Jerome, who responds by composing 2 books against Jovinian, the controversial Adversus Jovinium. Jerome writes that virginity should be a priority for the individual and also for the entire church. These texts are written in vehement style. The books have little or no respect for marriages. Marriage to Jerome is barely acceptable, but produces children, so it is necessary. Second or third marriages, widows and widowers, to Jerome are simply in the pursuit of carnal pleasures, and are scarcely indistinguishable from whoredom. Jerome also writes that the clergy should be made up solely of virgins. Now, of course, at this point in time, the late 4th century AD, the vast majority of clergy are married. And Jerome states that these married priests are temporary substitutes for the upcoming virgin clergy of God. The new Christianity, writes Jerome, will be tempered in the forges of sexual asceticism and must take over the Christian church. Christians must renounce sexuality, for it interferes with the individual's relationship to the divine. We must make our bodies passionless and desireless, writes Jerome, as close to the angels as possible. We must live the life of the Spirit, la vita angelica. Now, to Jerome, the physical body serves to anchor humanity, anchor us in the cycle of birth, death, and decay, further distancing an individual's destiny with God. Celibacy eliminates this cycle. So men, i.e. priests, must boycott the womb and go on strike against sexual activity. Now, Jerome's extremist views, well, stems from the writings of Origen, who states that the body is worth nothing unless it is used as a tool for spiritual transformation. To Origen, the body is what the spirit fell into when it lost its unity with God. Origen was, in fact, so anti-sex that he had himself castrated so that sexual desires would no longer plague his soul. Now, Pamasius, upon reading Jerome's view on Jovinian ideas, writes to inform him that many in Rome have taken offense at his writings. So Jerome responds by composing apology to Pamasius, an apology to him, which, quotes from Jerome's earlier works regarding marriage as a good and honorable state. Then Jerome turns his literary attention to Vigilantius, a Gallic priest, who has been, denouncing both celibacy and the veneration of saintly relics, calling those who worship them idolaters. Well, Jerome defends celibacy as a type of spiritual security, a way to fly away from temptation, and writes that the veneration of relics honors the martyrs and is not idolatry, for the saints are not gods. Jerome is not moderate in any way in defending what he viewed as virtue or combating what he viewed as evil. Jerome was always swift to anger, but also swift to feel remorse. And he was just as severe on himself as he was on the failings of others. All right.